Yeah, that's interesting. I love this, and I'd like to ask you some more questions about the component, right? The family component, because there's a number of things there that I think are important, and I have some insight on that too. But before we get to that, I'm curious about one other fundamental thing, which is, so they made this change, right, in Norway. They transitioned, right, from for the simplification purposes, we'll call it from the punishment-based or punishment-centered, approach to the rehabilitative approach.
Yes.
They were able to successfully make that transition. Do you think that because America, right, the United States of America, culturally is so different, right? We're a lot more independent. We've talked about this, I think, a little bit as well, kind of where the mindset of
Yes.
people in the US, right? American culture, because we're a little different. Do you think that transition can still successfully take place here, or do you think that there are some fundamental challenges with the way that we think, and maybe the rehabilitative approach would not be successful?
Well, that's a very good question because historically it's so different, right? When you ask people, when you have, when you do, questionnaire, when you ask people like any kind of age, any kind of historical background or ethical background, right? When you ask them, what like, are you pro punishment or pro rehabilitation? Most Americans these days, they believe that rehabilitation is important, but they still believe that you can, you have to punish a certain individual, right? And you have to lock this person away for a certain period of time. That is still the answer you get these days. And I ask myself, why is that? Because Americans are more like, like the freedom rights are very important. But, once a person is, violating another person's rights, Americans usually are very strict, right? Are very there's no question about it. They're not mild in their answers. They're very like pro or con, right? There's nothing in between so much. When you look at Europeans, the way they are looking at their freedom rights, and we don't have the right to bear arms, for example, as well, right, in Europe at all. So they are more mild and softer towards society. They say, okay, you did this wrong, but it was your first offense, right? There's nothing in your record. So you get a lot of first offenders actually get probation even for armed robbery, right? Because they say there's no history, right, of this offender. This was, an act. We can excuse that. We know why this happened, and then it's more milder, right? And that's also how society thinks, right? To give someone a second chance is much more important in European systems than it is in the US. In US,
Interesting.
like you do something wrong and you have to pay for it, right? That's it. Like get over it. In the US, it's like people are not really, which is on one side it's good, right? Because everyone has to, be way more ambitious, right? When I compare Europe and the US and Europe, a lot of people lean back, right? You have a society, you have a net, you have social security, which is very good there. You don't have to be as hustling and really make it work like in the US, right? Because in the US, every individual is, if you make it work, it's your responsibility, right? So people are harsher with with society itself or with other individuals, which can be good, but when it comes to criminal justice system, they don't really apologize for certain crimes, or they cannot really see beyond that and say, okay, let me look into that. Why did this happen, right? Can we, is it really right to punish someone with 25 years, right? Lifelong sentence, or even the death penalty in some states, right? Is it really worth it to go that far? Or do we really want this person to come back and to be, tax-paying citizen that maybe even, contributes to society even more, creates jobs, right? And, all these things. So the ethical background is different, very different, but I believe that, like in the US, there's also some changes that we can see, that a lot of citizens these days, they also want to, they want the reform, right? There has been studies that US Americans, like no matter what race, they want a reform in certain in certain systems and areas. So they see that it's like a racial problem in prisons, right? There's like a big problem, when it comes to death penalty, right? There's a big, always a big conversation about it. So they want a reform. I'm just not sure how long it might take to really implement all those changes, to allow more social time with your family, to allow more programs and therapies, right? To make it mandatory that a person that committed a crime while being intoxicated has to participate in, certain projects, right? It has to be mandatory. And you will see the effects pretty clear because you can make the studies right afterwards. You can make the study and say we start in 2025 with all these projects, and then by the end 2025 we have more than 100 prisoners participating in those studies, and we can really see was there effect or not, because it's tangible, right? It's not something that you have to hope for that it happens. You will actually see the results. And I hope that a lot of more prisons and a lot of more states would go that route to actually help people more, because as I said in the beginning, one crime doesn't make you a bad person, right? We're all born equal. We're all born as babies that are not evil, right? That's just what happens, right? The circumstances, society, certain circles in your life, they change people, right? They make people do something, but no one is born with a malicious intent to hurt someone or to do something bad, right? So we have to look at the components. How do we get rid of those, toxic cycles, and help people, right? To actually become, a law-abiding citizen again.
Well said. So many great points right there. And what's interesting is, as an American society, we believe in giving people second chances. We love the story of underdogs, right? You see this in movies and
Yes.
right. And so, and it's interesting, but then in practicality, right, when it comes to actually applying that, not everybody maybe necessarily thinks the same way, or maybe if most people do feel the same, if they feel that way, it's not, the transition hasn't happened, right? The criminal justice system tends to be more punitive and lock them away and throw away the keys kind of thing, right? Here in Utah, even for minor, relatively speaking, right, minor crimes, you could end up with, with a sentence that's very long, years and years. And then not only that, but then you have all these different crimes that are like, have life tops, right? 3 to life, 5 to life, 15 to life, right? And that's contrary to what you were just talking about, and kind of contrary to the point that I'm trying to make, which is that we believe in giving people a second chance. We believe in the underdog, because if you give somebody a life top here in Utah, like it really hampers their ability to ever really come back, right? Because
yes,
sometimes that leads to parole periods that are not just 1 year or 2 years of parole, right? There's individuals that will end up having to do 10, 15 years on parole. And some people will never get off parole, right? Once they get out, depending on what the crime is. So it's interesting to see that. One thing that you also mentioned that I'd like to touch on, I'd like to get your opinion on this. And I've heard somebody else say it, and I totally believe it's true. But we're quick to point fingers and to go, well, you broke the rules, you have to pay for your actions, right? We're culturally, right? That's how that's how most of us are, right? And I say most of us because I like to include myself in that. I personally have developed, obviously through my experiences, a slightly different way of looking at things. But the reason I bring that up is because I don't know if you've ever heard of this, and and I don't know what the number is right now in this moment, but if everybody that's ever committed a crime were to be convicted, you would have, a very high percentage of the population actually with a criminal record. But what happens is a lot of people, right, a lot of the finger pointers, right, the people that are quick to judge and quick to want to prosecute somebody right in their own little trial court of their mind, they've committed multiple crimes. They've just never been caught, right? And there's varying degrees of crimes, right? But given what the body of law that exists out there, right? And if you jaywalk, that's an infraction. If you do this, that's a misdemeanor. If you do that, it's a felony. Have you ever come across any studies that have kind of, and there's no exact number, but have you ever come across anything that talks about what percentage of Americans would actually have criminal records? if
Yeah,
they.
so when you exactly, so the one thing is people who get caught, right? And people who just do, this and that, like little things, but it adds up as well, right? Over the years, or how many people are driving drunk and never get caught, right? Not everyone gets caught, at all, right? Sometimes people are intoxicated, and they never get caught for some reasons, right? For some, they still can drive, appropriate, or they have only a short way to drive back, or they're not really a target for someone. They might not be a racial profile that a person gets stopped by the police, or there are certain things that, as you said also, you're like little things, little offenses, right? That never, when you never get caught for that, you also don't show up in those records and the statistics, right? So, but that applies also to anywhere in the world, right? So not only in the US. I believe that just the society is, which I think is good and also bad, is like in the US, when you talk to people, business people, private people, they're all very ambitious, right? A lot of people, like when I compare it, right, because I lived a lot of my life in Europe, right, and I lived a significant time now in the US. I can really see people are extremely ambitious in the US, right? You see that not only people working two jobs sometimes make it work, right? They start their own business while being still employed. You don't see that in Germany or in Europe, right? People are more, as I said, more comfortable and more, they feel safe. They don't want to challenge themselves, right? In the US, it's like, okay, I expect so much from myself, right? To where I want to be in the next year. So I also have that high expectation towards others, right? And that's why if someone commits something, people in the US are more easily like very strict, right? This person has to go to jail, right? They're immediately say, or when you also look at social media comments on certain things that happen all the time, every day, people are immediately, almost condemning, right? And say, okay, this person did that he has to go to prison. Like they don't even look into those circumstances or the facts, or they haven't even been, or they're not the attorneys of that person, right? They've never been, to this person's trial even, but they're easy to judge people, and they're very hard on others, right? Because they demand a lot from themselves. So what I believe is the society is so different, but I really hope that a lot of more states would come, just try these new approaches, right? Because rehab really works. It's just you can see it in the Scandinavian countries, right? They were starting off really, really bad in the 70s, 80s, 90s even still, and they made a big change, a big development. So in these days, they're considered the most modern and the best criminal justice system because of the low incarceration rate. So, it shows you it's not a coincidence, right?
Yeah.
And I believe if they can do it, and, they made this big change, the US can do it, without a problem, right? It just takes enough people to change it, right? And consistently go with that, right? And not just say that's a pilot project. We just do that with one certain prison in a state. And, let's just see how that goes. You have to really be committed to doing it.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And if I can take us back just a little bit to something we were talking about earlier, right? But as far as the ability for people that are incarcerated, whether they're awaiting trial or they've been convicted, right? Both, in a sense, like the problem exists with both groups of people, right? Where they're not, them being able to see their family and having that connection with their family is seen as a privilege, not as something that and when I say a privilege, I mean it is a privilege, but it's one of those things that's used almost as a bartering stick, that's easily suspended, right? Like they like almost like seeing like it's something that's not valuable. And you were pointing out how that's so important because when that person gets back out, right? If they've been, if the whether it's the jail system pre-conviction or the prison system post-conviction, if they made it difficult for that person to maintain a relationship with their family, if they made it so that their family has to jump through too many hoops to come see them,
Yes.
it makes it to where then that individual gets out, right? And depending on how long they've been incarcerated, it could be incredibly difficult. But they get out, and now where's the support group, right? And it's not just financial, but I think you would agree too, it's also psychological, emotional,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes, the
Maybe,
resources, like where are the resources, right? This person has no job anymore, has no roof over the head. They have no stable, factors in their life anymore. Sometimes it's only the parents that are still left for them to support them. The spouse or the ex-partner or the kids, even most of them that I see in my experience, they got divorced while they're being, in prison, right? The other party just filed for divorce, so they were even divorced in their absence, which is like, how can you defend yourself and how can you try to work it out, right? You can't. You don't have no option, right? Because there are no visits allowed, or not as many visits as there are needed, to be able to interact with your family, right, and with your social circle. So I believe when you don't have that and that's cut out, right, and that's completely you just cannot get to those resources anymore, society makes it extremely hard for them, right, to recover, to build themselves up, to even start their own business, right, or to even get into another job. It's
right,
extremely difficult because you have to always explain the years of when you've been incarcerated, right? So how, like, society knows that this is almost impossible, right? Only a very few percentage, I believe, between 7 and 12% are actually able to build themselves up to a certain level before they got arrested, right? Or even higher. So that shows you that it's like almost impossible for the majority of prisoners.
right, right. And it's something that's interesting that connects with this. And I remember I met a gentleman that was from England, and I don't know if you're familiar with this, but he was telling me that in England they have a law, or I think it's a law, right? Statute. It's called the right to be forgotten, which
Mhm.
connects with what we're talking about here, because for an individual that gets out, for him to be successful, the support group absolutely important, but
Mhm.
also the ability to be able to start fresh without being judged, right? Where here in the U.S., it's perfectly legal for employers to discriminate against somebody who's got a felony, for landlords, right, that discriminate against you, for pretty much anybody. Like, there are no limits. Like, you essentially, everybody's got the green light and permission to just disregard you, to ignore you, to not, what I mean, to not work with you,
Yes.
and it's out there, right? In the media, the news articles usually, right, related to whatever previous crime. That's the first stuff that comes up if somebody Googles you, no matter
Yeah.
what else you got going on. So it's like this scarlet letter that haunts you, that just follows you everywhere. Where he was telling me that in England, like, that law exists, and once you've paid your crime, then you can request and demand, right, that all this negative publicity be removed from media sources. Are you
Yes.
familiar with that?
Yes. So, but it's not in all countries in Europe, right? It's England. It's a big privilege. So, you have all in other countries where it takes a lot longer, right? It takes up to 10 years to clear your records. So you have that request. You can request it at some point, but it's not always successful, right? So you have to look into, the individual case. How long has this person served, right? How long was this person arrested and imprisoned? But then you have to actually you get the chance to clear your record. That's true, right? Which helps a lot, but it's still a long time that you have to live with that, right? And probably you would have to, even change or move to a different state or go to a total different city, right? Because people might still remember from the news or from wherever, right? They have, heard or read something about it. And it's really hard to get back into that society and to start something completely new, right? I mean, only a very small percentage of people are ever able to do that, right? So without the help of family and of their boss or their former employer, so it's super hard, right? And I believe it doesn't have to be that way, right? When you reintegrate this person into society, the person will get a job, or even better, start their own business, right? They have to pay taxes, they can employ others, right? It's the best for society, if you really engage as a citizen, and and then abide to the law, right? And you never get back to prison because you now value what you actually build up so much that you would not risk it again, right? But a person who has nothing to lose, they get out, they have no future, they have no plans, they have no visions, right? Sometimes it's also intellectual problem, right? Because if they only are surrounded by a certain circle, they cannot see, their talents or, what they're capable of, right? So that is also something, if you're not encouraged by someone, or you don't have a mentor, or you don't have friends that say, let's build something together, then you most likely end up, in the same circle, and maybe even in prison again, right? So you have to get the chance of, therapy, to get clean, to get, all these programs available to you. So you have a fresh start, at least a chance to have it.